Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I am really excited to have Monique Claiborne with me here today. She is the president and CEO of Greater Portland Inc., our public and private partnership here in Portland. Monique, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Blake.
So, Monique, there's so much going on in Portland. So much going on with Greater Portland Inc., what you guys are doing from a recruitment perspective and retention perspective of companies in Oregon. But before we get to all that, there's the people behind it. So let's talk about you. Who is Monique? Where'd you come from? How'd you become the president and CEO of GPI? And we'll start the journey there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me today. It's my first podcast.
Yes.
I'm super excited. So I've been in Portland for 4.5 years. Everyone thinks I just moved here when I accepted this job, and I did not. So native Detroiter.
Okay.
And mother was in commercial banking and wanted to be like mom. She was like my hero as a kid. So the goal was to be like her times 10. And I told her that. And so I decided to go investment banking. So I did investment banking, or graduated from University of Michigan Business School, ended up going to New York, Wall Street banking, got burnt out.
Oh, wow.
I know. Then there was a recession. And so I said, I'm out of here, going to London. And, master's in international public policy, worked at the Clinton Foundation, and thought I was going to go work at the World Bank. And the recession was still here, right? Not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Ended up back in Detroit doing foreign direct investment. And that's how I found a career in economic development, because it was, how can I just bring foreign companies to the Detroit area who at the time had an auto bailout and was going through the largest municipal bankruptcy in the country. And so that's how I found myself in economic development, doing this work in Detroit. Fast forward, met a guy who I'd known for a while, neighborhood friend. Yeah. And he moved to Portland. And that's how I ended up in Portland 4.5 years ago.
So did you guys have that? Oh, that's an interesting story in itself.
I
So
know.
you left to go to school and then New York and then to London, and then all of a sudden you came back to Detroit and like re-met each other?
So he was living in China. And when I decided to go to London, I was talking to my parents. I was like, when I decided I wanted to go overseas, it's where do I go? And they said, well, you should contact Silas from down the street. He's in China. So I ended up Skyping, because that's what you did back then. And he said, do you speak any languages? And I was like, no. And he was like, well, you can only go to London. And so that's how I ended up in London. And then subsequently, he moved back to Michigan as well. And then...
Yeah, and then he moved to Portland.
Yeah, and the rest is history.
Wow. Okay, so University of Michigan.
Yep.
So did you study finance and economics? What was the...
Yep, I studied business and finance. And at the time, Michigan was just a feeder for investment banks.
Yeah.
And if you did finance in Michigan, you end up going to be an investment banker.
And so because you wanted to tell your mom you were going to do it times 10, you said, I'm going to UM and then I'm going to New York.
Yep, and I'm out.
So how long were you in New York?
I was in New York for 3 years. So I did the analyst program. So it's usually 2 to 3 years. And then had an opportunity to be an associate, and then decided to go to London. But then it was also the market crash, right? So
this was right at like
09. Yep. And so I was doing derivatives on municipal bonds. And so, the derivatives, that's what got people into trouble, right? In those type of financing structure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So you were there for 3.5 years. The market crashes, and then you decide to go to London for what? Like what drew you to what? You just wanted to go overseas? Like what was the driver? And did you go to school when you were over in London to get your
Right. So I had to get out of. So I think that people decide you go back to school, right?
Yeah.
So at that time, you had a lot of people going back to get their masters because you didn't. Was it Lehman Brothers closed down, right? So you don't have places to work.
Yeah.
Everyone's downsizing from an investment banking standpoint, right? So
God, what a time.
Right?
That must have been crazy.
Yeah. And so I'm sure you have friends and you're like, they end up moving back home with mom and dad too, right? Like that was an option. And so that wasn't an option for me. And I thought, I already have a business degree. I've done finance and I wanted to do something else, right? And so it was also, so I was working on municipal bonds, and I thought, how can I take it up another level? So can I do this for countries?
Yeah.
And so that's really merchant banking. where you're doing these type of deals and transactions for developing countries.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I need an international or maybe a policy complement to the finance side. And so I ended up in London. And then also, I didn't have to take any type of standardized test, the GMAT or whatever, because it was also last minute. It was kind of like, where am I going? Need to get out of here. I have to decide if I'm going to go into the associate program. There's this crash, there's instability. So I haven't started preparing, for grad school. And so London, again, not speaking any foreign languages, not having to take any tests, already having good grades, really good experience. It became somewhat easy at the time. But looking back on it, it was very stressful.
Oh, I can imagine. So how long were you in London?
I was in London for 3 years. So did my master's program, ended up working at the Clinton Foundation when I was there. And we were doing retrofitting outdoor street lights to lower greenhouse gas emissions and structuring those projects during a global recession where municipalities didn't have a budget.
Yeah.
Right. So we were doing a lot of like creative financing, off balance sheet financing for those type of deals.
Jeez. You got a brain.
It's kind of cool.
I mean, wow. Okay. So you're in London for 3.5 years, then you come back to Detroit.
Yep.
What drove you back to Detroit? You were just done with London?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There was nothing in particular. It was just time. It was just time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Traveled, went everywhere while I was there, So.
Wow. So you come back to Detroit, and then what were you, did you have something like in between? Like, what did you do when you came back to Detroit?
So I think, it's a little hazy. So you had the recession, and then the auto bailout came right afterwards, right? And so Detroit's competitive industry is auto manufacturing.
Yeah.
And so I just saw a need and an opportunity. I saw an opportunity that how can I take everything that I've learned and bring back foreign direct investment to Detroit? And at the time, there was a new mayoral election. And so there was a lot of excitement, buzz, anticipation for the future in Detroit as well. And so it was a good time to get in, and they wanted like new talent as well.
Yeah.
And so it was just really the merging of me and the time and this opportunity for me to do economic development in Detroit presented itself.
So that's where you started your economic development sort of background or experience was started in Detroit and helping to rebuild what was going on there. Right. My brother was an attorney in Detroit for a while. He worked for a federal judge after he graduated from law school. Very nice. He worked right downtown. And then he went to work up in Traverse City for a little bit. But anyway, so Detroit, I went to visit him in Detroit a few times. And I think it was around that time too. So, I mean, that was a transformative time for the city. Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, so you were there for a period of time, and then your significant other moved out to Portland. So you said, I'm out of here too, and I'm going to Portland.
Yeah, go to Portland.
Did you know anything about Portland?
I knew about Portlandia.
Do you remember the 90s? People were talking about getting piercings and getting tribal tattoos.
Yeah.
And people were singing about saving the planet and forming bands. There's a place where that idea still exists as a reality. And I've been there. Portland.
Oregon?
Yeah. Did you watch any of the episodes? I mean,
and I remember.
God, isn't it about spot on when you get out here?
It really is. And I forget, what's the main guy, his name, with the dark hair?
Damn, what's his name?
Yes,
Fred Armisen. Yes.
We were walking down the street and we saw him.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and we're like, oh my gosh. He goes, yeah, it's me. And I was like, oh, I didn't know he lived here, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what year was that?
So we moved in 2017.
Okay, you moved out here. Okay. And then so the last 5 years, Portland was home base for what? Because you've been in this role, you've been in the GPI CEO president role for about a year, a little over a year. So what were you what was the?
So I was consulting. So when I left Detroit, I was actually working at the city of Detroit at the time, and I was the legislative operations CFO. And so I oversaw the budget for all the legislative bodies. So the courts, city council, city clerk.
Oh my gosh.
And I was pretty good at my job. And so I went to them and said, I'm leaving to go to Portland, but I can still do some consulting projects for you. And they said, game on. And so I started consulting. So I've been consulting the last 4 years before I took on the role. And I was flying back to Detroit frequently. But then was able to pick up other clients and start doing tax exempt consulting work. And so again, back in New York, I did bonds for tax-exempt entities. So I had already that background with municipal, nonprofits, higher ed, and even healthcare institutions that are tax-exempt. And so just started a consulting practice, doing that type of work over the last couple of years. And then when the position at GPI opened, I had a number of people saying, like, you got to go for it. Go. And so I'm here today.
So you did?
Yeah.
So was that... What was that? What was the process like? I mean, to go through all the interviews and that, like, what? I mean, it sounded like the background. It's like you're a perfect fit for the role, right? I mean, with all your experience, especially in cities like Detroit too, right? Like, there's just, Portland has our own challenges that we've been, having the last couple of years. And so, what's it been like for the last year?
I think there's some similarities in just here's a big city that's having challenges, right? And the media is not making it any easier. And so there are those parallels with Detroit and just the narrative of Portland has lost its own narrative, right? Everyone's speaking up for Portland instead of Portland's having a say as to what reputation they want to put out there, right? And so I think there are a lot of similarities there with Detroit. I mean, now we're we're the kid in dodgeball that no one wants to pick, and so from an economic development standpoint,
that's a good metaphor.
In Detroit, like, how do you recruit a company to come to Detroit during an auto bailout when people think houses are going for $1, you're going to get robbed walking down the street? And so to parallel that to Portland, how do you recruit companies to Portland where they think there are demonstrations on every block and there are homeless people on every other block, right? And so, I mean, different issues, different challenges, different cultures, but similar in terms of the impact that it has on economic development.
So the things that you guys do at GPI, right? I mean, the recruiting, like, out of town companies to come obviously to the metro, not just Portland, but to the metro, and then also, retention. What is that? I mean, I'm in the real estate business, so we've sort of seen some, some of the challenges too. It's like, what's been the feedback in the last, 18 months or a year since you've been here? Like, what's, because we're competing, our city is competing with a lot of the West Coast cities, and even, like Denver's and Salt Lakes and the Boise's and the others. And then obviously you've got sister cities of Seattle and the Bay, and that's Oakland and everything else. So, like, what's been some of the feedback that you guys have received from companies that are sort of at least biting around the edges of coming to Portland, and some of the things that we can continue to do better?
Right. So it's a mixed bag. Right. And so for those where it's a hard no, great, it's a hard no. Right. But even those that are hard yes, again, having an investment banking background, or even you in a real estate, if someone's like, yes, sold. It's like, okay, is this too good to be true? Right. And so we really kind of like that in the middle. But it's about not casting your net too wide, knowing what are our locational advantages, what the acute need is that we're solving, going after those type of companies. Again, we're not going to go after an auto company. We're not going to go after even maybe hard manufacturing, right? So it's knowing what our competitive advantages are, and working that from that angle.
And it seems like we're starting to get one of the industries, biotech seems to be an industry that's like really knocking on the door with the Twist project that went on in Wilsonville, Absize expansion up in Vancouver. I mean, it seems like there's that industry as a whole, not just in Portland, but as a whole across the country has really exploded in the last 18 months.
So it's one of our emerging clusters, but I find with an emerging cluster, you kind of need we you have to strike also while the iron's hot, but then you have to come at it at every vantage point.
Yeah.
So we have to have our higher eds on board. We have to have the government on board. We have to have our municipalities on board, our private sector, our associations. And I think when you get that momentum, that's how you can move an emerging cluster to a competitive cluster. And I don't know yet if Portland's on board.
Yeah. It's a lot of constituents to bring together to say like, hey, are we going to write this path in that way? Or like, we all going to row together to get there?
But I think there's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
And COVID has revealed that, right? All the money that's coming out, right, from the NHS and all the health organizations, there's been a huge investment within health, within bioscience that we hadn't seen in years prior. And I think this is really a good perfect storm if we want to take it.
Yeah. We just got to grab it and
we
go.
We really do.
And that's something that we're seeing too. I mean, a lot of the stuff too, like from an office worker perspective, COVID and the hybrid and remote work that's been a good thing in many cases, but a challenging thing too, just in terms of like revitalization. We'll see what happens when masks come off in a few days, thank God. But, just revitalizing, downtown, getting that buzz back. I think that's just a big thing that we just need to help create that energy and that momentum that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's even a lot more than buzz, right? So because of my work in Detroit, I had someone reach out and they wanted an introduction to Senator Wyden's because he's on the finance committee.
Yeah.
Something along those lines, finance, whatever committee. And they oversee tax credits. And the idea was, what do you do with all the obsolete, so federal tax credits.
Yeah.
What do you do with all the obsolete office space downtown? Can we lobby for a federal tax credit that can convert office space to housing, right? So it's more than just getting a buzz because what we know now is downtowns are going to be different.
Yeah.
Going forward, right? Like Biden just came out with a message, or he just announced last week, we need to get people back downtown and people need to start working. And then you have all these people like, wait, hold up. I like working hybrid, working remote, you know, I like working, across the country and my team is here and that's okay. And that's work. Like, why do I have to go back downtown just because we've had all this investment in infrastructure over decades and centuries in downtown? Right? Yeah. The downtowns of the future are going to look completely different, right? Yeah, and so it's not just bringing vibrancy in people, but it's also bringing people to live, because what do you do with these empty office spaces?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so those conversations are happening now with the federal tax credit and educating Senator Wyden on that federal tax credit. And maybe it'll get some momentum, maybe not, but I think it's important to start looking at downtown differently.
Yeah. Just putting a little bit of a creativity hat on too.
You have to.
We've had to do that a little bit, obviously, when COVID hit. And so now it's like, all of a sudden we can't just stop our creativity.
It's not going to go back to full occupancy.
Yeah.
Or those existing businesses, right? You can get to full occupancy with additional businesses, right? Because they're going to have like lower square footage in the space that they're occupying. But, getting people to work downtown, if we're relying on that, I think we're going to be waiting a long time. And we may even be disappointed.
Yeah. I think that's accurate. So some of the things from a leadership perspective that you've learned in your career. Right. I mean, there's probably a ton, just thinking about like just that ribbon of your career journey, from New York to London and back and now Portland. Like, what are some of the things that you've learned as a leader? And I think now as sort of running the arguably the biggest economic development group in all of Oregon, really. What are some of the things that you've learned about yourself and about leadership?
I think resiliency, right? The pandemic has shown that for so many people, right? But some people still made money during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And so
a lot of companies too.
Yep.
It's been a growth.
A lot of millionaires were created over the last 2 years, right? Yeah. And so it's being cognizant of that, but just knowing mental health, physical health, right? Like we've heard these buzzwords before, but even just personally, like my son started having seizures last summer, right? And so
how old is he?
He was 6 months at the time. And so to be in a space where health challenges are primary, right, to work, right? And so in being a leader and understanding pandemic hit people differently, right?
Yeah, totally.
Some it was for families was different than those that are single, right? And so everyone had these different type of challenges.
Yeah.
And so it's just being cognizant of that, being understanding of that, I think is incredibly important as a leader during the pandemic, but then making sure that even post-pandemic, right, that we are respectful and put provisions in place for staff, right? So there's a floor, right? And you're not going to just fall through it.
Yeah.
And at least those type of assurances, I think, go a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about, we right before we walked in here, we're talking about we're constantly on, at least for me, constantly on devices, like just trying to figure out, like, we've had to be, at least in our business, we've had to be on from the very beginning of COVID, like what's the return to, like, not wasn't return, like what do we do, right? And then after a few weeks, it was, okay, well, we're going to return to office, and okay, well, that was a pump fake. Okay, now we're going to return to office, no, pump fake, right? And so like we're always having to consume so much content, and it gets overwhelming, and you get burned out, and all these other things. So the mental health side of what I think, hopefully, COVID has illuminated, like, hey, we're all human too. Like, yeah, we got to work. We got work to get done, and we have leadership to go and do, and like lead people. But like, people get burned out too. They're like, there's the mental health and well-being of your staff and yourself.
Right.
Like, you can only be a good leader if you allow yourself to have some time to decompress a little bit.
Yeah, and so I implemented mental health days, right? And so we have a really good vacation benefits package here already at GPI, but I thought like it's important to at least acknowledge that, right? Like I understand, and some staff have shared things with me, right?
Yeah.
And so it's being as understanding, as possible with staff. I think I've done a decent job of that. I am always on. I really am. I am one of those type. And I think it's just because my investment banking days where...
Talk about being on.
Well, so it's like it was a good foundation, but I don't require that out of people, right?
Yeah.
Like you can be off, and then when you're on...
You're on.
Yeah. But I'm always on. But no, I understand it's important to have that balance.
Yeah.
Right?
So what do you do to decompress?
Podcast. I travel.
You're going to be hosting a podcast soon, okay?
Hopefully, maybe one day. But no, I really enjoy traveling. So again, when I lived in London, I was always in a different part of Europe, in North Africa, in the Middle East, and having moved back at a much slower pace, right? But I was traveling during the pandemic, and I'll be honest, I enjoyed the planes being empty and the airport being empty. I really did. I mean, I had to pause again when my son was a little sick, but I was in Montana last week.
Nice.
Was in Hawaii, was in Mexico, right? Yeah. And so I think it's important to like just,
get out.
For me, that's really important.
Yeah. Oh. So, if you had a chance in your life to have a cocktail or a coffee with anyone in history or present,
right?
Maybe it's some big maybe it's some big leadership group that we want to come into Portland. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who would that be for you personally?
So I'm very, very intrigued by Mackenzie Scott. So that's Jeff Bezos' ex-wife.
Yeah.
She is someone who built Amazon from the ground up, right? So for those who don't know the story, the two of them met when I think she interviewed him for work, way back when.
Yeah.
Subsequently, they both quit their jobs, moved to Seattle, and started Amazon, a book online company.
Yeah.
But she's an author, and she's always had a dream to write, and it was her book or her love for books that drove having a book, e-commerce business. And so...
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is. And so, I mean, he obviously started the business and the brains, but she was, she was one of their employees, one of the first employees. And so to look at what Amazon has done for commerce and completely revolutionize e-commerce, right? And to go from books to everything. And to have been there at day one, I think is incredibly interesting. But then to be the fourth richest woman in the world, or third, and she's committed to giving away half.
Oh yeah, she's
giving money everywhere right now. I'm on an organization now, and we've got a huge investment donation, anonymous, and I think it's her. I have no clue if it is or not, and there will be an announcement in the future coming up, but I'm like, she's just giving money to everyone right now. She's giving money to everyone. And I think that's very admirable, right? But then also from a business standpoint, to be there at Amazon at day one.
Yeah. And
then to marry your kid's science teacher. Yes. So she's remarried to her
kid's science teacher.
I think that's incredibly fascinating. Right? Imagine the fourth richest woman in the world is married to a science teacher.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hey, you can't stop love.
Let's have cocktails.
There you go.
Mackenzie, if you're listening, because she's one of your listeners.
Yeah, she is. She sends us DMs, and we'll get her on sometime.
Call Monique.
Yeah, call. So, what would be a couple things from the GPI perspective for people that may not be in Portland, but that might be outside of Portland that might be listening? Mackenzie, Scott, you might be one of them. Some important things about Portland that you'd want them to know as the leader of the economic development group in town. Like what is it that sort of service announcement about Portland?
Right. So I'll say what attracted me to Portland when I first came here: Mount Hood, the Pacific Ocean, wine country. I mean, like I said, I was skiing a couple of weeks ago in Montana. The fact that I can go less than an hour and ski here, I think is absolutely amazing. To go 30 minutes and then now I'm in wine country drinking Pinot Noir. Like I said, I've traveled all around the world and you see Oregon wine on the menu, right? Yeah. So you can get amazing red wine here, and then to go to Cannon Beach, even though the water's cold, but it's beautiful, right?
It's cold. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, I think that is a huge selling point. It really, really is. When you think about livability and quality of life, Portland I think it's really magical. I really do. And I think, I will say this, to be a woman of color, that surprises some people, right? Because Portland, as we know, is created as this white utopia, right? And so I have found community here, right? And I think if I like to think that other people could as well. And I think that's a huge selling point for anyone who wants to live here, for future employees of companies that want to expand into Portland, that there is real community here. There is a desire, even for sustainability, I think is incredibly, I say that word a lot, incredibly, it's one of my favorite words. I think that's unique to Portland. Like you can't get that in Dallas, right? You can't get that in New York. You can't get that in Chicago. I talked about working at the Clinton Foundation years ago, retrofitting outdoor streetlights. That means something to companies here in the greater Portland area, right? That there is a sustained way, there is an organic way of living, of being here. I think that's special about Portland, greater Portland.
Yeah, I agree. So for those that want to learn more about Greater Portland Inc. and about where their companies can start to learn more about the Metro and the things that we offer, where can they go to find out?
So greaterportlandinc.com.
Okay.
So all regions have, or most metropolitan regions have, an economic development organization. And so we are that for Greater Portland. And so it's great because we really are a one-stop shop, right? And so if you have real estate needs, if you have HR needs, if you have project management, if you want help with accessing credits and incentives, right? We can put you in touch with all of those different entities. So to be a convener for those type of projects is really makes your job easier for those companies, those executives that are considering expansion. And so that's the work that we do. We're completely funded from our public and private sector, and there are businesses that have a direct advantage, right, or benefit for companies locating, right? Like if you're an accountant or you're a law firm. But then there are those that just want a prosperous economy, and jobs and putting money in people's pocket, it's the most tangible way to do so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what about you? Where can people learn more about you?
LinkedIn.
Okay. Yeah.
Or contact me directly.
Perfect.
My information's on the website.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Monique, Thank you so much for joining me.
It was so fast.
Yeah, was it fast? Did it seem fast?
It flew by.
Right? And
you're
here.
easy to talk to.
Well, that's why these are fun.
Yeah.
You get to learn so much about people. Like that's what I was saying about the history, about where, like, you're in London, you're in New York, you're like that to me. And then the fact that you got back together with your significant other at that time and fun and go.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the things that to me, I think help tell a story about where people, it's not just where they are today, but like what brought them to where they are, you know? And, it's just fun to, a great opportunity to sit with you and listen, right? And ask the questions and then just sort of learn your career journey. So I just appreciate you joining me on the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah.